Being a Chelsea fan is great. Over the last 21 years, I've been accustomed to us winning trophies. Trophies. At the top, it gets lonely. While for the most part, we've had things our way on the pitch, outside of our success, there's still a stigma that remains about Chelsea and its fans. You've got no history, it's no mystery, you're racist. People have asked me, how can you be black and a Chelsea fan? After everything that's happened with the players and the fans, if the history is tainted, tell me what my place is. As we're beginning a new era at the club, I think now is a perfect time to look back at Chelsea's history with race and really answer the question, how can you be black and a Chelsea fan?
I have this silly little routine where I put Liquidator on and it puts me in the mood to write about Chelsea, which I know is pretty childish for a bloke in his 60s, but, you know, you have to live a little bit, don't you? The story about the Liquidator's quite interesting in as much as the pub across the road from the shed entrance to the football ground, the mods used to hang out and then they'd go across the road to the football. There was a DJ called Pete Owen and Dave Scott who were involved in something called pre-match spin. They would invite people to send in requests to play tunes. And my mate heard Liquidator in the pub and people thought this is quite a catchy tune. I think it was played for the first time at Stamford Bridge, I think it would have been September '69.
First game I ever went to was 1969 and it wasn't just the atmosphere and being amongst the crowd and seeing all these sporting heroes in the amazing game, but the music was something that just it just took over. I was 8 in 1969, so I was very impressionable, and that stuck with me forever. That was where I fell in love with Jamaican music, essentially.
Harry Johnson was a record producer over in Jamaica. He licensed the tune Liquidator and organised a group of session musicians, the most gifted of which is Winston Wright, the Hammond organ player, because that is everything that tune is about, is that swirling Hammond organ sound.
The thing is with it, it's perfect for the chant, isn't it? I mean, it leaves that gap for the clapping and you know, Chelsea.
I've always loved reggae music, so that was always my foundation. So when Chelsea had the Liquidator, it was kind of like Chelsea were cool as well. It was quite ironic that all the Chelsea fans were listening to this music, but not a lot of the people liked the people who actually played the music.
I used to stand at the shed end and you'd look over, everyone was Skinhead. It was an anti-hippie, basically. It was what was going on with hippie and the long hair and the sort of clothes. They wanted like the antithesis of it. And it was also an extension of the mod look, but it was a very smart style. So it was very difficult not to find it appealing if you did come from a working class background. And it was obviously, yeah, they were into the music. They were heavily into reggae, but they're obviously into Motown, Stax, you know, it's into basically black culture.
So I grew up listening to ska, reggae. On the estate I grew up in Hackney, we had sound boys, so we had shebeens going on. And even as kids, you know, we were involved in all this party scene. But there was also mods and skinheads, all in the same estate, and we all hung out.
We were that first generation, I feel, really, where people grew up in what was the beginnings of a multicultural society.
It was like Jamaican boy come over when I was 5 years old. So it was kind of strange, but because I got on everywhere I go, I seemed to get on with a lot of people. So when I came to England, I used to see white people, and there's a blonde girl, and I'd never seen blonde girl before, or blonde. So at school, I used to play with her hair because I used to sit behind her because it was all weird to me.
At that time, skinheads seemed to be accepting of Jamaican music, so it was kind of like, okay, they're cool. But then there became a sinister element that started to became associated with fascism. And then we started to realize that there was two sectors, those that were fascists and those that were kind of cool with black music.
And then it became quite nasty. It became quite violent. You know, there was the National Front were recruiting people, and it tended to be people who looked like skinheads.
I've always stayed a Chelsea fan, but of course in those days I certainly associated myself with the racism, the racist chants on the terraces. I remember once we were really bad as a team at the time. I remember going to a dismal second tier game. We were playing Hull City at home, if I remember correctly, and there were only 9,000 people, I think, attended. That's how bad things were. But we sold 700 copies of the Young National Front magazine, Bulldog, outside, so that means 10% of the crowd.
I came to a game, and there was a guy, they were selling the National Front, and one of the guys on there was my brother's best friend. You know, and he got caught up in that. And he ended up going to prison, and because he was gullible, I guess.
I edited that magazine, and I went to prison twice for editing it, for inciting racial hatred. And I learned racism from my father's knee. He had this thing about the British Empire. He was old enough to remember all those things, and resented the changes he saw happening in the UK in the years after World War II.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, people are racist and people are horrible, but sometimes it's because they don't know better, because that's what their parents taught them. You know, racism is a learnt behaviour. If you've got two little kids playing together, they're going to play with each other, and it's not till a parent comes and says, oh, don't play with them. And then it puts that mindset. Mm-hmm.
For me, it was about whipping up violence against the system, including against non-whites. So I ran with the whole crowd. It's very difficult for me to understand why Chelsea became one of the most racist sets of supporters. I really don't know.
National Front associated themselves with football because they had a willing audience, young people that they could influence. And before you know it, you went to a meeting, before you know it, you're I'm just going to say it, but you're Paki bashing.
I had Pakistani friends, Indian friends, who are of heritage, Indian heritage, and they started being fearful of skinheads because, they used to run after and beat them up. Totally changed the whole thing of being a skinhead.
I think it's the best thing to be. I agree with the man. I ain't taking second place to no niggers and yids in my own country. If he's a Nazi, so am I. I just think I'm English.
I was very scared about skinheads, definitely scared, because we were all, little young boys, and these were big kids. Maybe they were only 20, but they were big to us. So, yeah, I'd be very scared about them.
And then by the time you got to the late 70s, there was something of a skinhead revival, and it was embraced by people who were into the whole black culture again. But by then, you also had a whole group of skinheads who were into like oi music and stuff like that, which were overtly racist.
There was shows that we wouldn't go to, even as young teenagers. There was bands we really liked. There was some of your shows on, and we'd go near and we'd hear from outside, but we wouldn't go in because there was this reputation for the trouble, and you just didn't want to get pulled into that. See, I think a lot of it was caused by the governments at that time, because it was causing a lot of division anyway, and we had these sus laws.
The sus law was an old Victorian law, also known as the Vagrancy Law, or Vagrancy Act. And in that act, any policeman could arrest somebody on suspicion of doing or about to commit a crime. So even if you hadn't done something, you could still be arrested. And the police in the 70s and 80s, they used this law mercilessly against black people to the extent it led to the Brixton riots of 1981.
When Ghost Town was #1, I mean, that same year, there was all those massive riots going on.
Plus, I've been into stop and search. And when they stop and search you, it wasn't nice, I'm being honest with you. Some of my white friends used to say, oh, God, never, how comes they treat you like that?
I think it was a society problem. And if you remember that the society starts with the government, and Margaret Thatcher, who was the leader of Britain at the time, she had very racist policies. What happened on the football pitches, people thought it was okay to be racist because it stemmed from the government.
My first experience of sort of racism at Chelsea is we'd got promoted and we played Liverpool and John Barnes was playing for Liverpool. And there were monkey chants. What can I do? I decided in myself that you're not going to stop me from coming. I'm going to still come in and I don't care what you say to me or what you do. This is my enjoyment and you're not going to spoil it for me.
I used to go to reserve games and Paul Canoville was playing for us. There was one guy, he was with a group of people who was just shouting the most obscene racial abuse. Nobody did anything. Nobody came, there were no stewards. But I spoke to the man and I said, what you just discussed, what are you talking about? And it was just vile racist abuse. Couldn't be. No one stood alongside me trying to sort of tell this fella to shut up. So it went on and on. Paul Canoville was subject to racial abuse throughout the game.
It was a case of not giving in. It was a dream. It's always been a dream since the age of 5 to be a professional footballer. Any youngster wants to be in the first team. That's where I wanted to be. John Neal, bless him, gave me my opportunity. When he told me that day, yeah, you're sub, against Crystal Palace, it was, yeah, excitement, adrenaline running through my body, getting my family members down there to see me, and expecting if I get the opportunity to get on, yeah, what would I do? I started to warm up down the line, started to hear this racist abuse being shouted at me. And I thought, wow, if that's Crystal Palace fans trying to put me off, ooh, I'm gonna have to try a bit harder. And that's when I turned around and was shocked it wasn't Crystal Palace fans, it was my own. And not accepting me because of the colour of my skin. Yeah, it was a difficult one. It was draining because it wasn't expected. It was weird because generally when you're in the change room, you have banter amongst your teammates. I was sat in the corner and they came in and they saw me and it was literally quiet. I mean, literally. It was that close where the fans were close to the pitch that they heard all what I received, all the abuse. What could they say to me? I don't even remember how I got home that day. All I know, the phone was blaring and family members telling me, why would you want to play for a racist side?
A lot of people stopped going. That was, you felt lumped in. I mean, it was horrible to be a Chelsea fan in the 80s. You know, you'd sometimes, if people say, oh, what team do you support? You'd be a bit reluctant to say because people would immediately have some kind of preconception about you, that you're a member of Combat 18, this neo-Nazi group, or that you're just, you know, just like fighting. You don't, it was really awful times.
At the time, chairman was telling our players not to talk about the situation at all. For me, as a young black boy, I didn't want to complain or make any noise because I felt like if I did, I would be the one kicked out. I'd be the one that you can't take it. But today, if you can understand, you should complain. You can say, stand up.
About a year after Paul had made his debut, Pat Nevin scored the winner against Crystal Palace. And it was a great goal. The cameras wanted to interview him about the goal. And he said, I don't want to talk about that goal. I want to talk about the Chelsea fans I love, but they're doing something disgusting. They shouldn't be booing Paul Canoville. They should be celebrating him and cherishing him, and I really want them to stop.
Pat, and just how we linked and we got on music, that for him, boldly spoke out. He didn't talk about the winning goal. He talked about, the racism I was receiving.
That gave the people who were ignorant and bigoted maybe food for thought, but it also empowered the rest of us, the majority, who thought, actually, now we can speak up.
Canoville playing out wide on the left and involved early. Oh, what a start! Was that his first touch of the ball? Astonishing.
There was no associations like kick it out, red card, that were about to talk to or discuss. And Chelsea, knowing themselves at that time, didn't really initially come and ask me how am I feeling and so forth. It did affect my mental health, I'm not gonna lie. It was a case I didn't share with anybody. I just used to say, I'm all right, but I wasn't. Sometimes you gotta grit your teeth and turn your head and walk, and that's what I had to do.
Like 1982-83, Paul makes his debut and abused by his own fans. 9 years later, Kenny Monkau, another black player from the Netherlands, comes in and is voted by fans Player of the Year. And a year later, another black centre-half, Paul Elliott, comes in and he's given the captaincy.
The impact was, God, there's a black man who's a captain. And I think, given Chelsea's history, but also to be the first black captain in the Premier League as well, I think was very important for me, as well as Chelsea, because, people want to look up to people. I looked up to people, and whether I like it or not, I inherited that mantle.
Here comes Paul Elliott, off the post, in at the second attempt.
I felt more scrutiny. I felt more intensity. I felt that every mistake I make was always going to be amplified more. With all due respect, I'm 6'3" and black, and I've seen how psychologically it's affected some great players that couldn't cope with that.
We had black players coming through, and it was almost like they had to do well for me. Can't have them giving away a penalty, because as soon as a black player did something wrong, you could hear the undertones in the crowd, and it wasn't nice.
There were still challenges there, of course there were. And you had in particular, the government brought in this legislation called the Football Offences Act, which was in the early 90s, 1991, which was really prohibiting supporters from behaving inappropriately. And that means missile throwing, homophobic behaviour, racial abuse. Now, it was there in principle. The hardest thing was to actually implement that.
When's the shift? When we started to get successful. When Ruud Gullit came, how could you slag off the former world best player of the year? It just, from that moment on, you didn't hear it. It became a more cosmopolitan team, and our support became more cosmopolitan as well.
And Zola, it's in! Eddie Newton has made it 2 for Chelsea.
You think about Ruud Gullit, he was like Chelsea's first black coach, Chelsea won the FA Cup. Somebody said to me the other day, Paul, do you think one day we'll ever get, racism will never be here? I says no. But I think football is doing a good job. But I think as an activist, as a campaigner, I have to, with my colleagues, challenge football even more so.
10, 15 years ago, it was probably much worse, and it never got highlighted. And I think it's definitely, come a long way and people are standing up a lot more now than, what they did before. But no, we still definitely have, a lot more room to improve and, try and put an end to it full stop. But no, I think progress is, the right word.
Over the years, Chelsea has tried to take responsibility for the behaviour of their fans. Through the No to Hate campaign, for example, Chelsea is trying both to make sure that the stadium, Stamford Bridge, is a safe place, and then also to make sure that there's education out there for people who might not understand why racism is wrong. If you are racially abusive that you might face, you might face being ejected, you might be arrested, you can have your season ticket taken away. And then there are mechanisms for people to report that to the club, so action can be taken immediately during the match.
There's obviously the younger generation now, like you are seeing a lot of diverse players. I think it's even proven that, like in our team, there's been more additions to the squad. And yeah, just hopefully that as the years keep going on, that there's more diverse. But yeah, I think it's heading in the right direction.
People don't really understand the changes that's gone on in the club. And I think it's quite funny because Chelsea have that history where people always want to bring out the bad stuff. We're not really a club that other people enjoy unless you support us.
You can hate on the team, but you can't hate on the brothers because they're proper, they're doing their thing.
Black culture's influenced Chelsea, whether people have liked it or not, but now it's visible. All you have to do is look at campaigns.
And we've got a lot more trophies.
We've got more trophies. Look at the campaigns. You look at the people. You look at the people that are called notable Chelsea fans. Yeah. May his soul rest in peace. Jamal Edwards was the face of being a Chelsea fan. Do you get where I'm coming from? Like, ultimately, black identity is plastered everywhere to do with this club. Liquidator is probably like, like a yard man tune. No. They wouldn't know that, but now all of that information is front and center. People understand that, and it's championed. It's not just a secret anymore. I think that, for me, from what I perceive, I think that would be the big difference.
When I tell people I'm a Chelsea fan, the first thing they'll say, if they're like part of the opposite team, they'll be like, "Oh, your team's racist." I'm like, I hear it because of some of the stuff that's happened in the past, but for me personally, I attach Chelsea with like ethnic excellence. Do you know what I mean?
Sometimes Chelsea fans need to acknowledge the fact that what people are saying about our club are actually valid things, and how for a lot of people, and sometimes me included, this is not a safe space and it's not a safe club for black people, and we should be able to just say that. So a lot of the time I don't really challenge it, but then when I do sometimes challenge it, I just tell people that no club is perfect.
Chelsea just feels like home to me, and I think a lot of the reason why that is because of we had a very large African contingent, which contributed a lot to our success. So Drogba, Mikel, Essien, and I feel like I felt very represented on the pitch, and I still feel represented on the pitch now with Reece James and Nicholas Jackson and all these players that are playing for us today.
Chelsea's story is a part of Britain's story with multiculturalism. It's one full of contradictions. Chelsea fans liked Caribbean music, but not Caribbean players. Are skinheads good or bad? And how can I continue supporting this club? But like with the history of Britain, I'm a part of Chelsea's history. My name, Xaymaca, is the original name for Jamaica, so I connect with the Liquidator on a deeper level. And my Nigerian heritage also helps me to identify with Chelsea's African players. Of course, there's still racism in football, but Chelsea and its fan base is trying to change its image to one that's inclusive, fashionable, and welcoming. So, how can I be black and a Chelsea fan? Because blue is the colour.